Money, I've learned, doesn't make you warmer when your blood pools crimson against virgin snow. The Cessna Citation had been my pride, sleek silver, cutting through clouds like a blade through silk. Now it lay twisted, a metal carcass bleeding fuel across the wide expanse of nowhere. Alaska stretched endlessly before us, pristine and pitiless, wearing winter like armor. "Well," I said, watching steam rise from Lance's split lip, "this is inconvenient." Felicia pressed herself against the fuselage, designer coat already surrendering to the cold. Her breath came in desperate puffs, small frightened clouds that dissipated faster than her confidence. Lance Williams, my wife's photographer, dabbed at his wound with fingers that trembled. Whether from cold or guilt, I couldn't tell. "Not yet. How far are we from civilization?" Felicia's voice carried that familiar note, the one that used to make me move mountains. Now it just made me calculate distances. 50 miles. Maybe 70. I pulled the emergency kit from beneath twisted metal, each item a small mercy. Give or take a lifetime. Lance stood slowly, camera bag still slung across his shoulder, like some pathetic anchor to his former life. Professional instincts die hard, even when death comes calling. If you feel like this story might reach you somehow, follow the channel. That way, you help me bring more stories like this, and we grow with every life we learn from. "The radio's dead," he announced, though I'd already known this. "And my satellite phone ... He gestured helplessly at the wreckage. "Then we walk." Simple words. Simple plan. Nothing simple about the execution. The wind picked up, howling through spruce trees that stood like frozen sentinels. Each gust carried ice crystals that bit exposed skin with crystalline teeth. I'd built an empire worth $3 billion. But here, now, wealth measured different. Body heat, calories, time, and trust, that rarest currency of all. "Ethan, we can't just..." Felicia began. "We can't just what? Stay here?" I shouldered the survival pack, feeling its meager weight. "The plane's gone dark. No GPS. No heat. We have maybe 6 hours before hypothermia makes decisions for us." Lance cleared his throat, a sound I'd grown to hate over the past month. "Maybe we should wait. Search and rescue." Search and rescue assumes someone knows we're missing. I checked my watch. 3:47 p.m. They'll start looking tomorrow. Maybe. Maybe was a word for people who still believed in maybe. I'd seen Lance's hand brush my wife's during our last dinner in Anchorage. Casual, practiced, the kind of touch that speaks its own language. One I'd learned to read long before I'd learned to speak it myself. The cold was already working its way through my bones. But something colder had been working its way through my marriage for months. I'd hired Lance Williams for his reputation, his eye for capturing beauty in harsh places. I hadn't expected him to develop such a keen appreciation for beauty closer to home. "We head south," I decided, consulting the compass from my emergency kit. "There's a mining road 40 miles that direction. Abandoned, but it connects to the highway system." 40 miles? Felicia's voice cracked like thin ice. "Ethan, that's impossible." I studied her face, the face I'd fallen in love with at Stanford, the face that graced charity galas and magazine covers. Pretty faces, I'd learned, often hid ugly truths. Impossible is staying here and freezing to death. Improbable is making it out alive. I prefer improbable. Lance adjusted his camera strap, and I caught the way his eyes found Felicia's. A moment, a heartbeat, a silent conversation I wasn't invited to join. How long had they been speaking this secret language? The snow began falling harder, fat flakes that would have been beautiful in any other context. Here, they were tiny harbingers of death, each one a countdown tick toward our collective grave. I'd built my fortune reading patterns, predicting market behaviors, seeing connections others missed. The pattern forming between my wife and her photographer was becoming beautifully, terrifyingly clear. "Stay close," I instructed, though part of me wondered if I wanted them close at all. The weather's turning. We began our march through snow that crunched like broken glass beneath our feet. Each step felt like a small defeat, energy hemorrhaging into the frozen ground. I kept our pace steady, not because I was confident, but because confidence was another form of currency here. If I appeared weak, if I showed doubt, the fragile ecosystem of our survival would collapse. And collapse, I suspected, was exactly what someone wanted. Lance fell into step beside Felicia, their shoulders occasionally brushing, natural in the narrow path between trees. Natural if you believed in natural anymore. I let them walk ahead while I catalogued every shared glance, every whispered word the wind tried to steal. How long have you two been fucking? The words left my lips before I'd consciously decided to speak them, blunt, clinical, like discussing quarterly projections. They stopped walking. Snow continued to fall around us, nature providing its own soundtrack to betrayal. Felicia turned slowly, her face a masterpiece of wounded innocence. Ethan, what are you? Please. I held up a hand. I'm cold, tired, and potentially dying. The least you could do is respect my intelligence. Lance's jaw tightened. For a photographer, he had remarkably poor awareness of when he was being observed. This isn't the time. When exactly would be the time, Lance? When we're hypothermic? When the search teams find our bodies arranged in some convenient tableau of tragic accident. The silence stretched between us like a frozen lake, beautiful, treacherous, waiting for someone to test its thickness. 3 months, Felicia whispered finally. It's been 3 months. I nodded, processing this information with the same calm I'd used to navigate hostile corporate takeovers. 3 months. That lined up perfectly with when Lance had become her preferred photographer, when his name had started appearing on her calendar with suspicious frequency. And the plan? I asked conversationally. I assume there's a plan. There's always a plan. Lance stepped protectively in front of my wife, a gesture that might have been noble in different circumstances. Here, it simply confirmed what I'd already deduced. You're being paranoid, he said, but his voice carried all the conviction of a penny stock pitch. Paranoid would be thinking you arranged this crash. I'm not paranoid. I gestured at the wilderness around us. I'm practical. And practically speaking, my death here solves a lot of problems for you. The wind howled through the trees, and I caught something else in its voice, something deeper, darker. A sound that made my lizard brain remember when humans weren't apex predators. A roar. Distant but unmistakable. What was that? Felicia pressed closer to Lance, and I noted how naturally she turned to him for protection. How easily she'd forgotten she had a husband standing right there. I'd heard that sound before, on a hunting trip in Montana. Grizzly bear. Probably male, judging by the depth. Probably large, judging by how the sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. We need to move, now. This wasn't paranoia. This was survival. But as we hurried through the deepening snow, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was dealing with more than one predator. The bear was honest, at least. It wanted to kill us for simple, biological reasons. The humans I was traveling with had more complex motivations. And complex motivations, in my experience, led to complex solutions. The temperature was dropping with the sun, and our footprints left a clear trail in the snow breadcrumbs, leading any interested parties directly to us. I calculated distances, calories, survival odds. The numbers weren't encouraging, but numbers, I'd learned, were just one way of keeping score. There, Lance pointed through the trees. Is that smoke? I followed his gaze and saw it, a thin gray line rising against the darkening sky. Cabin, maybe. Hunting lodge. Some form of shelter that might keep us alive long enough to see morning. Might keep us alive long enough for me to figure out exactly how far this conspiracy extended. 1/2 mile, I estimated. Maybe less. We pushed toward the smoke with renewed energy, hope being another currency we couldn't afford to waste. But hope, like everything else in this frozen wasteland, came with a price. The roar came again. Closer this time. Much closer. It's following us, Felicia whispered, and for the first time since the crash, I heard genuine fear in her voice. Not the manufactured concern of someone playing a part, but primal terror. Bears don't usually track humans, Lance said, but uncertainty colored his words. Usually, I hefted a fallen branch, testing its weight, but we're not in usual circumstances. The cabin materialized to the trees like salvation wrapped in cedar logs. Smoke still rose from its chimney, promising heat, safety, time to think, time to plan, time to discover who wanted me dead and why. We reached the porch as full darkness claimed the forest. Lance knocked while I watched the tree line, branch still in hand. Felicia stood between us, and I wondered if that positioning was as symbolic as it appeared. No answer. I tried the door unlocked because people still believed in trust this far from civilization. The interior was warm, lived in, abandoned recently enough. The coffee still steamed in a mug on the kitchen table. "Hello?" Lance called out. "Anyone home?" No response except the crackling of logs in the fireplace. "Convenient," I murmured, settling into a chair that gave me a clear view of both the door and my traveling companions. What's that supposed to mean? Felicia stripped off her coat, and I noticed how Lance's eyes followed the motion. It means someone left their cabin unlocked, the fire burning, the coffee cooling. Either they're coming back soon, or they left in a hurry. I gestured toward the window, and given the tracks I see in the snow outside, I'm guessing it was the latter. Bare tracks, massive ones, leading right up to the cabin's front steps. Lance moved to the window, and I saw his face pale in the firelight. Jesus Christ, how big is that thing? "Big enough to crack a man's skull like an egg," I said, watching Felicia's reaction carefully. "Big enough to make this whole situation significantly more complicated." She met my eyes across the room, and for a moment, the mask slipped. Behind the fear, behind the guilt, I saw something else. Something calculating. Something that looked remarkably like relief. Because dead men, even when eaten by bears, couldn't contest wills. Couldn't ask inconvenient questions about infidelity or inheritance. Couldn't complicate the simple mathematics of betrayal. The bear roared again, so close the cabin's windows rattled, and I realized I wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. I was fighting for truth. The fire cast dancing shadows across the cabin walls, turning familiar objects into potential weapons or hiding places. Lance had found a rifle mounted above the fireplace unloaded. Naturally, the ammunition would be elsewhere. Assuming it existed at all, check the bedroom, I instructed. Look for shells, emergency supplies, anything useful. Lance hesitated. "What about you?" "I'm going to barricade the door. That thing outside isn't going away, and this cabin wasn't built to keep out a determined grizzly." As Lance disappeared into the back room, I caught Felicia's arm, gently, the way a loving husband might. "How much does he?" I whispered. Her eyes widened with manufactured confusion. "Know about what?" "About the insurance policies, the trusts, the very convenient way my death would simplify both your lives." She pulled away, but not before I felt her pulse spike beneath my fingers. "Ethan, you're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared, but not of me." I released her and began dragging furniture against the door. Heavy wooden table, bookshelf loaded with survival guides and hunting magazines. Each barrier another minute of borrowed time. "Found something." Lance's voice carried from the bedroom, followed by the metallic click of ammunition being loaded. He emerged carrying the rifle and a box of shells, his face flushed with hope or excitement. In the firelight, the two emotions looked remarkably similar. "30-06, he announced. "Enough to stop a bear." "Enough to stop anything," I agreed, noting how comfortable he looked with the weapon. "You hunt much, Lance?" "Some. My father taught me." Another piece of information to file away. Lance Williams, photographer, adulterer, marksman. The resume of a man with options. The cabin shuddered as something massive struck the exterior wall. Wood groaned. Dust rained from the ceiling. Outside, claws scraped against logs like fingernails on a coffin lid. "It's testing the structure," I observed. "Intelligent. Patient." Felicia huddled near the fire, designer jeans and cashmere sweater making her look like a refugee from better circumstances. "Why won't it just leave us alone?" "Because we're food," Lance said, checking the rifle sight. "And it's hungry." But I knew predators, having been one for most of my professional life. This wasn't about hunger. This was about territory, dominance, the kind of primal mathematics that governed both wilderness and boardrooms. The bear had marked this place as its own, and we were trespassers. Trespassers who'd brought our own set of predator-prey relationships into its domain. The scratching stopped. Silence fell like a curtain, heavy and expectant. "Where is it?" Felicia whispered. Lance moved to the window, rifle ready. "I can't see." The glass exploded inward as a massive paw swatted through the frame. Lance stumbled backward, firing reflexively. The shot went wide, punching through the cabin's far wall and probably traveling into empty forest. The bear's head followed its paw through the window, a nightmare of fur and teeth and murderous intelligence. Its eyes found mine across the room, and I saw something disturbingly familiar there. Recognition, understanding. We were both apex predators who'd found worthy opponents. Lance worked the bolt action, ejecting the spent casing. His hand shook, but his aim steadied as the bear struggled to force more of its bulk through the narrow window frame. "Shoot it!" Felicia screamed. The second shot took the bear in the shoulder, spinning it sideways. Blood spattered across broken glass and splintered wood. The animal roared not in pain, but in rage, and disappeared back into the darkness. "Did you kill it?" Felicia asked. Lance was already reloading. "No, wounded it. Made it angry." I studied the blood pattern on the floor, the trajectory of the shots, the angle of attack. Details mattered, especially when death was doing the accounting. "It'll be back," I said. "Wounded animals are more dangerous, not less. Then we need to leave. Now." Lance shouldered the rifle like a soldier preparing for battle. "Head for that mining road you mentioned." "In the dark? With an injured grizzly tracking us?" I shook my head. "That's suicide. Staying here is suicide too." He had a point. The cabin's defenses had been compromised, its illusion of safety shattered like the window. But running blind through unfamiliar forest seemed equally futile. Unless running wasn't the real goal. "There's a third option," I said quietly. They both looked at me, fear and hope warring in their expressions. "We use ourselves as bait. Draw it back here, on our terms. One of us takes position outside, makes noise, draws its attention. The other two wait inside with the rifle. When it comes through that window again, we put it down." "That's insane," Felicia breathed. "Whoever goes outside might die." "Yes." I met her gaze steadily. "But might also save us all. The question is, who volunteers?" Lance stepped forward immediately. "I'll do it." Too quickly, too eagerly. The response of a man who saw opportunity disguised as sacrifice. "No," I said. "I should be the one. It's my wife, my expedition, my responsibility." "Ethan, don't be stupid." "Stupid would be trusting the man who's been fucking my wife to protect our lives while I'm conveniently mauled to death outside." The words hung in the air like smoke from the rifle. Lance's face went pale, then red, cycling through the emotional spectrum of a man whose cover had been blown. "You think I'd," he began. "I think you do whatever it takes to get what you want, just like I would." I smiled, feeling ice form in my veins that had nothing to do with temperature. "The difference is, I'm better at it." Felicia moved between us, her hands raised like a referee stopping a boxing match. "Stop it, both of you. That thing is still out there, and we're in here arguing about murder," I finished. "Let's call it what it is. About the most convenient accident in the history of convenient accidents." Lance raised the rifle slightly, not quite pointing it at me, but not pointing it away either. "You're paranoid. I'm wealthy. Paranoia comes with the territory." The bear's roar echoed through the forest, closer now. It was circling back, preparing for another assault. Time was running out, and decisions needed to be made. I walked to the kitchen and picked up a butcher knife from the counter. Heavy steel, well maintained. The kind of tool that could serve multiple purposes. "New plan," I announced. "We all go outside together, back to back. No one gets left behind. No one gets convenient opportunities." "That's suicide," Lance protested. "Maybe, but it's honest suicide. No ulterior motives, no insurance payouts, no inheritance complications." I tested the knife's edge against my thumb, drawing a thin line of blood. Just good old-fashioned death by predator. Felicia stared at the blood on my thumb with something that looked like hunger. "Ethan, you're bleeding." "We're all bleeding, sweetheart. Some of us are just more honest about it." The bear's next attack came without warning. The door exploded inward despite our barricades, furniture scattering like toys. The animal filled the doorway 9 feet of muscle and fury, blood matting its shoulder where Lance's bullet had found its mark. Lance fired again. The shot caught the bear center mass, but it barely slowed the animal's charge. 300 pounds of apex predator launched itself across the cabin's interior, claws extended, jaws gaping. I dove left, Felicia screamed and dropped to the floor. Lance tried to work the bolt action, but there wasn't time. The bear landed on him like judgment itself. The sound of breaking bones carried clearly over Felicia's screams. Lance's rifle spun away, clattering across wooden floorboards that were rapidly turning red. The bear's jaws closed around his shoulder, and Lance's scream cut off abruptly. I had two choices: save the man who'd been fucking my wife, or let nature take its course. I chose option 3, moving quickly but carefully. I stepped behind the bear and drove the butcher knife deep into its neck, just below the skull. The blade severed the spinal cord with surgical precision, a skill I'd learned in medical school before switching to business. The bear collapsed immediately, its massive weight pinning Lance to the floor. "Help me," Lance whispered, blood frothing from his lips. "Please." I knelt beside him, studying the damage. Crushed ribs, punctured lung, probably internal bleeding. Survivable with immediate medical attention, fatal without it. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it, "but you're not going to make it." His eyes widened with understanding, not just about his injuries, but about what came next. "Felicia," he gasped. "Run." But my wife hadn't moved from where she'd fallen. She sat on the floor, staring at Lance's broken body with an expression I'd never seen before. Not grief, not horror, relief. "You planned this," I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. "Not the crash, not the bear, but this, his death." She looked up at me with eyes like winter. He was getting complicated, demanding more than we'd agreed to. He thought I loved him, that we'd run away together after you were gone. She stood slowly, brushing dust from her jeans. I needed someone to help with the practical details, but I never intended to share the inheritance. Lance tried to speak, but only blood came out. "So you seduced him, promised him everything, then let nature provide a convenient exit strategy." I wiped the knife clean on the bear's fur. Elegant, efficient. I learned from the best. It was almost a compliment. Lance's breathing grew shallower, more labored. His eyes found mine one last time, and I saw the question there. Why hadn't I tried harder to save him? "Because," I said quietly, "she never loved either of us. And dead men don't complicate divorce proceedings." His final breath misted in the cold air, then dissipated like a secret told to the wind. Felicia watched him die with the same clinical detachment I'd used to evaluate quarterly reports. When it was over, she stepped carefully around the blood and kissed my cheek. "We should probably stay warm tonight," she said. "Long walk tomorrow." I nodded, already calculating distances, supplies, survival odds. The mathematics of marriage had always been complicated, but widowhood was elegantly simple. "There's something you should know," I said, as she settled beside the fire. "What's that?" I sabotaged the plane. Her hand froze halfway to the coffee mug. "What?" 30 minutes before takeoff. Simple mechanical failure, designed to go unnoticed until we were airborne. I sat across from her, the dead bear between us like a furry altar. "I needed Lance isolated, vulnerable, and I needed you to see what you'd choose when survival was at stake." The color drained from her face. "You could have killed us all." "I could have, but I didn't, because unlike you, I'm not interested in murder. I'm interested in truth." She stared at me across the firelight, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. "You knew about everything. Private investigators are remarkably thorough when properly motivated. I've known about Lance for 4 months. About your little plan for 3, I gestured toward his body. I even know about the insurance policies you thought I didn't know you'd taken out. Then why? Why arrange this elaborate theater? Because I wanted to see how far you'd go, what you'd sacrifice, whether there was anything left of the woman I married." The silence stretched between us like thin ice over dark water. "And?" she asked finally. "There isn't." I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the forest that had just claimed one life and revealed 2 others. The snow had stopped falling, and stars were beginning to appear through breaking clouds. "The search teams will find us tomorrow," I continued. "Tragic accident. Plane crash, bear attack, 1 fatality. Lance Williams, heroic photographer who died trying to protect his clients. What about us?" "Us?" I turned back to her, noting how the firelight made her look like a beautiful stranger. "There is no us anymore. There's you, and there's me. And there's the story we're going to tell. She was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. What story? The truth, mostly. I sat back down, positioning myself where I could watch both doors. Lance was having an affair with my wife. He convinced her to help him arrange my death for the insurance money. During the crash and bear attack, I discovered their plan and was forced to defend myself. You have no proof. I have his phone, the one that didn't get destroyed in the crash. I produced Lance's satellite device from my pocket. Text messages between you two, photos, video calls. Very thorough documentation of your conspiracy. Her face went through several emotional transformations before settling on something like resignation. What do you want? She asked. What I've always wanted. A wife who loves me more than money. And if that's not possible, then I want a divorce that doesn't bankrupt me or send me to prison for murder. We sat in silence, listening to the fire consume itself log by log. Outside, the wind had died down, leaving only the vast quiet of wilderness where secrets went to die. The bear, she said eventually. You killed it so cleanly, like you've done it before. Medical school teaches anatomy. Business school teaches where to apply pressure for maximum effect. I smiled, feeling something cold and permanent settle in my chest. Turns out the skills transfer nicely. She shivered despite the fire's warmth. You're not the man I married. Neither are you the woman I married. The difference is, I adapted. Dawn was still hours away, but I could feel it coming like judgment. With it would come rescue, questions, the complex machinery of explanation and investigation. But tonight, in this cabin surrounded by evidence of betrayal and survival, there was only truth, cold, sharp, and absolutely final. Get some sleep, I told her. Tomorrow we start over. Together? I looked at Lance's body, at the dead bear, at the woman who'd planned my murder with the same casual attention she'd once used to plan dinner parties. Apart, I said. Definitely apart. She curled up near the fire, using Lance's coat as a blanket. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed her, and she slept the dreamless sleep of the guilty. I stayed awake, watching shadows dance across the cabin walls, calculating the exact words I'd used to explain how Lance Williams had died a hero instead of a conspirator, how my wife had been an innocent victim rather than an accomplice, how sometimes the bear wins, and sometimes justice wears fur and fangs. The mathematics of survival were simple. Adapt or die. But the mathematics of marriage, those were infinitely more complex. And I'd always been good with numbers. I watched Felicia sleep, her face peaceful in the firelight, and wondered when exactly I'd stopped being her husband and started being her retirement plan. Dollars does something to people. Transforms you from a person into a prize, from a lover into a lottery ticket waiting to be cashed. She could have asked for a divorce, taken half of everything in a civilized dissolution of our failed partnership. California's community property laws would have made her extraordinarily wealthy without requiring a single drop of blood. But that wasn't enough, was it? Half was compromise. Murder was commitment to a grander vision, one where she kept everything, and I became nothing more than a tragic footnote in her ascension to financial supremacy. The ambition that had once attracted me to her, that brilliant hunger I'd mistaken for passion, had metastasized into something cancerous, consuming everything human about the woman I'd pledged to love until death do us part. Perhaps that's what money truly does to relationships. It reveals them, strips away the pretty lies we tell ourselves about love conquering all, exposing the transactional skeleton beneath every kiss, every promise, every whispered endearment. I'd built an empire, believing I was creating security for the people I loved, never realizing I was actually building a target on my own back. In Felicia's eyes, and Lance's, and probably dozens of others circling my wealth like carrion birds, I wasn't Ethan Wood the man, I was Ethan Wood the resource to be harvested. They saw my heartbeat as an inconvenient obstacle between them and financial freedom, my continuing existence, as a clerical error waiting to be corrected. The most intimate betrayal wasn't her sleeping with Lance. It was her reducing our entire marriage to a cost-benefit analysis where my death was simply the most profitable outcome. She'd calculated the exact worth of my life, weighed it against the value of my fortune, and found it wanting. That, perhaps, was the coldest mathematics of all. And I'd always been good with numbers. Thank you for staying with me and listening. Your attention is a gift. Did these minutes mean something to you? Then please, follow the channel. Every click from you is a push that helps me keep bringing stories that truly stay with us.